right, everybody, welcome to another webinar here at Route Consultant. For those of you who may be here for the first time, my name is Josh Gregory. I'm the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. If you're not familiar with us, our team ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and line haul. And today we're really focused on both helping current contractors to understand all the crazy things happening in this space. If you didn't watch last week, we talked about the port strike and really what to be thinking about, and that is happening this week. And then for everyone who's trying to get into this space, we really want to help you understand what you're getting into so that you go in eyes wide open and really make the right decisions and hopefully find the right business and pay the right price for it. So for everybody who's here every week, welcome back. And now before I go too much farther, I do have a quick disclaimer to read. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So all that to say, if you've never been here, format-wise, the way today is going to work, we're going to go through some content, some things that we want to talk about, some updates on events and listings, and then we'll open it up for pure Q&A. So if you're on here and you have questions about anything that we talk about today or anything about the space, the logistics industry as a whole, we'll be happy to be on here and answer it, and we'll be on here as long as you need us to answer whatever questions do come up. So first, if I know that there are a lot of contractors right now that are at the FedEx event. If you're not familiar with that, FedEx in the last couple of years has started to really do some contractor outreach events, and it's really a great opportunity to hear from FedEx and ask questions of that leadership team. So hopefully everyone who's attending is going to get some answers and find out some confidence and some positive ideas about where FedEx is heading and taking our industry. But for today, what I really wanted to focus on is that I want to really help everyone think through their timeline for the remainder of the year. Now, I know a lot of contractors right now come to us at this point and they still ask us if it's possible to sell before peak season, to have a buyer come in and be successful. And that timeline is actually really short. So what we wanted to take some time on today is to talk through what you need to do if you're a seller and you're still trying to get out before peak season, whether you have a listing live or you're trying to bring it to market right now. And then on the other side, for any of you who are trying to buy right now before peak season, we wanted to highlight what you need to be doing and thinking about. And then if you have to wait until after peak season to buy or sell, what should you be doing between now and then if you really want to be successful in the new year? So today I have Leah Nelson from my team who's going to be jumping in to give her insight on this process. So Leah, why don't you come on and introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I am Leah Nelson. I've been on the webinar a couple times. Always love being here. I really kind of built up the financial analysis department for Route Consultant, and I still really live in the numbers world and the selling world and helping, sellers in the FedEx market as well as some of our other silos, prepare their business for listing and then help them market it and ask questions and really just dive into the business from kind of the jump. So hopping into that, as Josh mentioned, we're going to chat about what makes a smooth listing process and all the items that you need to send to us, your broker and your analyst and the whole team to get listed really as quickly as possible. Of course, I kind of want to say in order to, inform potential buyers about your business, we need to know as much about your business as possible. That's really our goal. So make sure when you're sending this information, I'm going to give in a minute just like a list of all the stuff that we need, but make sure that you're being as detailed and as forthcoming with us as you can. If you have any monsters in the closet, it's best to tell us about those ahead of time so we can help fix them and market them in the proper way. Really don't, we're asking for this information for a reason. And it's not really advantageous to anyone of hiding anything from us or really anything like that. If you have something that you think is going to make your business look less attractive, that's kind of what we're here for, is to help say, here's how you can fix it or whatever it may be. So just want to preface by saying that as far as documents go, we're going to ask for quite a few documents. There are several that we need to put together to make the comprehensive story of your business and make the marketing packet for your business and make it, again, informative and comprehensive. So first, we're in kind of at the basic level, we're going to ask for your MGB login as a seller. You technically don't have to supply this if you're uncomfortable. I do want to say that, but under really no circumstances are we ever going to change or alter anything in your portal. We simply want it so we can pull information and we don't have to keep asking you for documents. So the information that we pull from your MGB is going to be settlement statements, normally 12 months, just to get kind of a history there. Your copy of your contract, daily service worksheets, your PCAT and CSP performance indicators. So as a seller, that's the information that we're going to go in and just download those documents. So we have them on file and can look at those. We do like to keep an updated MyGroundBiz login on file so we can keep those documents up to date in our system. We can keep pulling settlement statements, make sure everything's tracking properly and just really keep an eye on those. Makes it easier for you as a seller if we've just got that on file. So we're not like, hey, can you pull 52 weeks of settlement statements? I know that's kind of a big task and we want to really take that off of your hands. So that's why we ask for that. So kind of looking at those individual documents as well, as a seller, we're going to look at your settlement statements. We're going to look at the last 6 to 8 weeks of revenue. 6 to 8 weeks of revenue, your daily service worksheets, we're going to take a look at the daily miles of your routes as well as how many routes you run. I will say we do typically see these 2 documents. They're kind of gospel to us. They come straight from FedEx. We download them directly. If it said your daily service worksheets say you run 15 routes and you run 10, or you say you run 10, there's going to be some discrepancies there and we're going to keep asking questions. So keep that in mind. We are going to typically see, again, settlement statements and daily service worksheets as kind of, those are our really kind of hard and fast documents. On the contract, we're going to look for your terms, your zip codes, things like that, just simple information to put in the marketing packet. And on the PCAT, we're going to sometimes look at your projected revenue if you have a new contract go into place or something like that recently. But more often than not, we're going to be looking at your variable and kind of fixed rate percentage to see what the composition of your contract looks like. After that, and this one's really important because there's a lot of ways that this one can go, we're going to ask for payroll records. A couple really important things about payroll records. So to get them, in the format that we need them in, we need 6 weeks of payroll records broken down by week and by driver. That's really important. It's going to show us how many drivers worked each week, their names and weekly pay are really going to be like the 3 big items we want to see from your payroll records. Most payroll records do show those things. There are very few payroll records that don't show those things. But again, please don't send us, oftentimes we'll get 6 weeks of like lump sum payroll where it's just one number for the total 6 weeks. That's not very helpful to us. It doesn't break down. We don't really know how many drivers were on each week. We don't know what their weekly pay rates are. It can be confusing. So if you send us, 6 weeks of lump sum payroll, we will ask them broken down by week and by driver. So from the outset, just go ahead and get that broken out. Normally it's pretty easy to do that in your payroll system, whatever that may be. So ideally, a couple other things we like to see on payroll records. Again, payroll records differ depending on what services you use, but the daily or hourly rate of your drivers, we are going to request that. If it's not shown on the payroll automatically, just send it to us in an Excel or a list or something of that nature. If you offer any bonuses or incentives, any benefits such as vacation time or health insurance, let us know what those are. If you offer those, if you offer them to half your drivers or all your drivers or whatever that may be. And more importantly, if you do offer those things, tell us the cost of them. We'll sometimes ask, hey, do you offer health insurance? And the answer we just get is yes. And while that's great to know that information, it is also important for us when we're putting together, again, this comprehensive picture of your business to know how much those things cost. Is it $30 per driver per month, or is it $200 per driver per month, or whatever it is? So putting that together, make sure you know all that information and you tell us that up front. So again, we're going to put together projections based on this information. So it's better for us to know all the costs up front instead of having this come out later on. Also, kind of in the payroll sphere, we need to know your workers' compensation rate. We don't necessarily need to know just your mod score. A lot of times we'll ask for the workers' compensation rate and people will send us the mod score. It's helpful to see that, in regards to your safety record, if you've got a good safety record or a bad safety record. It doesn't really help us put the financials together. We do need the actual workers' compensation rate, which is a percentage of payroll. So normally it'll be anywhere kind of between like 6 and 12% of payroll, kind of depending on your safety score and the state that you're in. If you don't send us your workers' compensation rate, we are just going to use the state average. We are able to pull those, but and a lot of times having your actual score will help make your financials more accurate and make them look a little bit better, because a lot of scores are if you've got a good safety record, lower than the state average. So make sure you supply us with that. Again, kind of keeping on the payroll and employee track, let us know which people on your payroll are managers or lead drivers or mechanics. Have that written out ahead of time. Say, hey, here's my staff list. Here's the job role of everyone. whose drivers, what their role is, and then let us also know in detail what your managers, lead drivers, mechanics, whoever it is, what their responsibilities are on a daily basis. Again, we don't really need to know that for drivers. We know what drivers do, but anyone who's not a driver, let us know. Again, particularly for managers. And we also like to know you as an owner. What do you do on a daily basis? What does your manager do? What do you do? Again, just helps us put together that picture for a buyer and how much they're going to have to take on when they take on the business. We will also request after this the list of vehicles that you've got. So a couple key pieces of information that we need for the vehicles, the truck list, is starting with the basics, VIN, year, make, and model of each truck. That's pretty easy. It's kind of just gonna, again, be the basics of what we need and what we ask for. We do ask for the VIN so we can pull the weight of the vehicles. So that's really why we ask for the VIN, and then for the contract later on, that's helpful to have. But we'll also need the current mileage of each vehicle. So go ahead and get that together. If you're wanting to sell, go ahead and get the current mileage of your vehicle. If any of your trucks have had engine or transmission replacements, you can let us know that as well. Particularly if you have an older fleet, if you've done some of those replacements, putting that in the prospectus in the marketing packet can make your fleet more attractive to buyers. We also want to know how much truck debt you have and if it's transferable to a new owner. So go ahead and get in contact with your bank. If you've got truck debt, say, hey, how much is my debt? Can I transfer it, to someone new if I need to? This can be a really creative way to help buyers finance a purchase, is by having that truck debt, and knowing that from the outset, again, can make your business just more attractive to people. And then the last item, we do request truck titles. So go ahead, gather your truck titles, all of those things, whether it's a picture of the front and the back, or the actual, whatever it is, a copy of it from your bank, however you need to get that truck title, go ahead and gather all of those. So we've got those. So as soon as we've got a buyer and they're ready for a contract, we do have to have those truck titles to put the contracts together. So we have those. If we have them on file from the beginning, then we hit no delays later on in the process. Now, another very important item, and one that I am quite passionate about, and one that we really like to have on file, is historical financials. So preferably we'll want to see the last 3 years of tax returns, not just P&Ls. We like to have tax returns on file because they were, submitted to the government. So I do want to say we've seen, at least I have seen probably 1,000 tax returns over my years here. We know that your tax returns in a lot of cases, show a loss. There's a lot of expenses on there to get that number down. You've got depreciation, interest, all of those things. When taken at face value, tax returns, people are scared to send them. They're like, oh, my business makes more money than this. We know that. So that's why we consider add backs, which are expenses that will not transfer to a new owner. So we'll have a list of add backs. The few expenses that are always considered add backs are going to be interest, depreciation, amortization, and owner's compensation. We always know those are add backs. But if you have any other add backs, so once again, any other expenses that are personal expenses or won't transfer to a new owner, let us know that when you submit your tax returns to us. Go ahead and get that list together. Say, look at your tax returns, look at every year of your returns, and say, these are expenses that will not transfer to a new owner. And speaking to that, don't be too general about it. Tell us exactly what the expense is. Sometimes people will say, oh, I repaired my fence in my yard or whatever, and I put it on my tax return. That's an add back, but that's all we'll say. And there may not be a line item for fence repair on there. So we have to do some investigating, some digging, and say, hey, well, you say you did this, but where does it show up and how much is it for? So go ahead and get that list together. And again, be as, detailed and just accurate as possible. So we don't have to keep going back and forth to really understand. If you get all that together ahead of time, it makes the process a whole lot faster. So again, we want the last 3 years of tax returns with that add back list, as well as a year-to-date profit and loss statement. Preferably one that isn't older than 2 or 3 months. That's kind of the bank standard requirement, but it helps us as well. And I will say, when we're putting together your marketing packet, when we're putting together projections, we look at the most recent 6 weeks of information. That's how we do it. That's how we've always done it. We think really looking at the business right now is how it operates right now is the best way to do it. But it can be incredibly helpful to have those last couple of years of financials on file to compare to the current condition of the business, to see if it's been operating the same for the last couple of years. And if it's not, why have there been changes? Why is it doing better, or why is it doing worse? Because those questions will come up later, and it's so much easier to address it on the front end and know that ahead of time than later on when we have buyers and we have to figure out all the kinks. Kind of last thing, not with the tax returns, but with all the other information, the payroll, settlement statements, all of that stuff. We are, again, looking at a 6-week snapshot. So we want to make sure all of those documents are from the same time period, from the same date ranges. we want to look at all information from September. We don't want to have payroll from March and settlements from September and looking at different time periods. We want to look at the same date range. So that's really a lot of the information that we're going to request at the beginning. As far as the process goes, and this is helpful to have if you want to get listed quick, if you have got all this information gathered, what are the steps that we take? So we do need a listing agreement on file, which is pretty simple. You can send us the documents, we'll get the listing agreement signed. Ideally, as the seller, you'll sign this listing agreement and send us all of the information, really within a day or two. I mean, as quickly as you can get it together. If we can get that all at once, we can get your business listed in just a couple of days. So once we have the listing agreement, all the documents, our team, the analyst team, will go together and put projections together, which is, again, taking that 6 weeks of information and just like doing a forward 12-month statement. We'll send you a copy of those projections. We'll say, hey, based on the information you provided us, this is what we put together. Does this look correct to you? We can't really move forward to the full marketing packet until you say these projections look good to me. Also, when you review the projections, assuming they do look good, that's when we'll have a pricing discussion. So, whether you've got a price in your head or you're waiting on us, that is when that pricing discussion will happen. Also, speaking to the projections, make sure that you're reviewing them thoroughly. Sometimes we'll send projections, people will look at them, say, or not really look at them, open the document and say, that looks great. And then they realize, later on, once we've built the full marketing packet, that maybe those projections weren't as accurate as they wanted them to be. So again, looking at information like that as soon as you can, as soon as we send the projections before we build a full packet, makes the whole process so much smoother and so much faster for everyone. So anyways, we've got the projections, we've got the price that we've all agreed on that we think sounds good. Then we'll build the marketing packet. That only takes, a day or two. And once that's all good to go, we'll send you the marketing packet for final review. And then we'll send you what is our compliance form, just stating, hey, this looks great. Marketing packet's accurate as far as I can tell. And then we'll go live. So really the process takes as long or as short as you as the seller want it to. If it takes you 2 days to send us the information, we can get listed in just a couple of days. If it takes, 3 months to send all the information, it can take 3 months to get listed. So, we can really move as slowly or as quickly as you want to, but all of the information above, if you get all of that together, if you have all those, answers to the questions that you think we may have, again, add backs, payroll, job responsibilities, all of those things can really, really help make the process smooth, make it quick, make it easy. If you gathered all this information today, send it to us tomorrow, we could get listed early next week, so as far as sellers go, that's really what we've got. Buyers, I don't work with buyers quite as much as I do sellers, so I might defer to that for you, Josh.
That's fair. And just highlighting a couple of things too at the end here. So first, all of these things Leah talked about, all of these documents that we're telling you to gather, it's not for no reason. Part of it is for us to analyze the business, but part of it is we know that these are the questions that buyers and banks will ask. We've done, hundreds, thousands of these deals. We know all of these things that are going to come up. And if we can preemptively answer all of those questions in the evaluation, then it's going to, one, speed up the process, but two, as a buyer, when you're going into this, if you have questions and it takes weeks to answer them, that really damages the confidence in you and your business. And it slows things down, and inevitably time kills all deals. If you're taking weeks to answer a question, then they may look for another deal. So if you're trying to make your business get to market as quickly as possible, it's filling all of this out and it's being ready to move forward with all of this. And then the last thing I'd say to speed things up is if your timeline is condensed as a seller, then the bank is often going to be one of the hardest things to get done quickly. It's very difficult to speed up a bank. So what you may have to do is if you're trying to go really quick in a process, you may have to be flexible and have alternate options. Leah mentioned one around vehicle financing. If you have any vehicle debt that can be assumed, it's a great way to have a buyer come in and do, some amount of cash, some amount of vehicle financing assumption. And then lastly, seller financing. The more seller financing you can be open to, the more your buyer pool can open and you can avoid a bank. So if we're talking at a time like this where you're trying to get out before peak season, or if you're really trying, there's a lot of different reasons that can come up where you're trying to do an accelerated timeline sale. These are all the things you need to be thinking about as you're going through this. Now, Leah, I know there's going to be sellers that want to get out before peak but aren't able to. So if they do want to speed up and optimize their sale process coming out of peak season, are there any things that you would recommend for them to be doing and focusing on?
Absolutely, yes. So if you want to list, really directly after peak season, I would say my recommendation is to cut all of the extra, resources and trucks that you've gotten for peak as quickly as you can. You don't want to hold on to, 5 extra rental trucks or, 5 extra drivers that you don't need. Slim that down as quick as you can after peak season. And then that will help us look at your business as it will operate normally quicker. If you keep those extra drivers and trucks on through February, we're not going to get good data until like mid-March because we have to have that 4 to 6 weeks. But if you're able to slim down mid-January, we can look at your business mid to late February, and that'll be an accurate representation of what the business looks like. Otherwise, if you do come to us on like Jan 1 and you say, I want to list right now, we're going to have to look at data from September and October because we can't really use peak season data. It's going to skew everything. It's not going to be an accurate representation. So ideally, if you want to sell right after peak, I would recommend coming to us kind of late January, early February. We'll take a look at it. Again, sometimes we have to wait till mid-February, but again, the sooner you slim down, the sooner you get back to normal operations, the sooner we can help you get listed.
Yeah, and I think that's important if you're trying to sell quickly, but in general, I see this as a margin killer in Q1 for a lot of contractors. They'll leave that bloated payroll for the first couple of months. Maybe they don't even slim down until March, and then you've lost Q1. If you've got a 60% payroll for a whole quarter, you're kind of digging out of the hole for the entire year. So it's a good rule of thumb if you're trying to sell quickly at the beginning of the year. It's a good rule of thumb if you're a contractor in general, is that, Christmas Day, you need to be having your hiring and firing conversations to slim down and get your resource count in line come January, February.
Yeah.
Now, so Leah talked through the seller side, but sometimes the speeding up of the process does have to come from the buyer side. And whether it is this year and you're trying to close on something really quickly, or it's next year, there are critical things you should be doing right now. The first thing we'll always talk about, we call them the 4 pillars. If you haven't done those, if you haven't heard of those and you're still trying to close this year, drop everything and go do that until you're done. If you're still planning on closing next year, if it's not a this year thing, you still want to make sure these are done to speed up the FedEx process as much as possible. So there's 4. I'll go through them quickly. If people have questions on them, I'm happy to talk about them later in the Q&A. But the 4 things we always talk about, the first is the RFI. This is the business plan that has to be submitted to FedEx for you to be able to interview with FedEx. This is going to involve things like your background, your work experience, but more importantly, from FedEx's perspective, how you plan on handling things like safety and the operations and contingency. And a lot of this is really important for you to do early. 1, because it's something you have to do to move forward in the process once you get to the interview. But 2, this helps you to start to think through how you would handle those things, how you would handle an operation, which gives you kind of the vision to be able to talk about these things. If there are gaps in your knowledge base, to ask those questions and get those answers earlier rather than later. 1, because you need to know it, but 2, when you are actually talking to these sellers and doing, evaluating these businesses, if you can be equipped with these answers and can kind of show that you know what you're talking about, it adds a lot of confidence to the seller and can move the deal forward more quickly. So it's the RFI. The second one is the asset purchase agreement. We do strongly recommend using an asset purchase agreement versus a stock purchase agreement. There's a bunch of things to talk about there. So if you have questions and you're trying to figure that out, let me know and I can come back to it. But what we're talking about here is the contract that you plan on using with a seller. Ideally, you've reviewed it and thought through if there's any contingencies or things that you want to add and are ready to bring that contract to the table when you find a business. The reason for this is I have seen more delays and slowdowns in a back and forth between buyers and sellers over the contract than almost anywhere else. And with attorneys, time is always money. So if as much as you can do on the front end to bring this, again, it will speed things up and it also kind of can really help differentiate you as a buyer if you're going to a seller and saying, I already have a contract that I've reviewed and I'm ready to go. If you're working with us as a buyer or as a consulting client, we do have a template that you can review and use at any point in the process. So if that is kind of the step you're on, make sure that you can get as much of that out of the way as possible. Next one is the funding plan. Now, if what I'm really referring to is understanding what kind of capital and resources you can bring to the deal. And if you do plan on using a bank, kind of think through what options you might want to consider, whether it's SBA or conventional or some other means. And if you do identify a bank or two that you wanted to work with, the main thing you'll want to do is be able to provide your info. And mainly that's your personal tax returns, your business tax returns, and they often will request an RFI similar to a business plan as well. And so if you've already done that RFI work, you can give that to them. But I will say, as a word of caution, what you're trying to do here is identify your options and form a connection, because most banks at this stage will say, it's great to meet you. Thank you for submitting your info, but we need to see the business you're looking at before we can do much else. Sometimes there will be banks that give pre-approvals for a certain dollar amount. I really don't put a lot of weight on that, because most of those will change once they actually see a business and evaluate the business. So really, you're just trying to think about what options you want to use so that you can jump in as soon as you have a deal and service it to a few different options. The last one is incorporation. So you do have to be either an S Corp or a C Corp. Incorporated is one of those two options to operate in the FedEx space. And if you don't have that, you can't interview. And so there's no LLCs. To be clear, you can't do an LLC, and you have to be an S Corp or a C Corp. So if you are using one, whichever of those two you plan to use, you have to be incorporated and have the proof of good standing to be able to interview. So if you can do each of these four things as soon as possible in the process, you're setting yourself up to quickly move on a deal as soon as it comes to market. And you're projecting a lot of confidence in a seller, where sometimes it's not always the highest price that wins. Sometimes if you have a competitive price in your offer, but also are showing that you can move forward quickly in the process, sometimes that can be the farthest, the thing that moves the needle the most and really gets your offer accepted. Now, an important note for those of you who are either in process or still trying to close this peak season, another really important thing you need to be doing right now is to know what resources that they're bringing in for peak season, vehicles, drivers, if they're adding any additional vendors, whatever it is, so that you can pick up that ball and start running as we head into the busiest time of the year. We're really in kind of a condensed time frame here. So if you're standing up in these next couple of months, you need to hit the ground running. Now, I think lastly, for a big group of you, there's a group of you either on this webinar or who are watching later that are looking at businesses now and don't plan on closing until next year. So what that means is you've got about 3 months of this year left. And just about the worst decision that you can make is to take your foot off of the gas and just wait until January to think about this or to do anything to prepare for the next step. Often what I find is it's not the seller that slows down the process, but that buyer not being ready to move quickly. So you need to spend these next few months finishing up, number one, anything in those 4 pillars that you haven't done yet, and then continue to evaluate these business opportunities and work to position yourself in the best possible way to acquire one of these. Now, if you haven't already joined our consulting program, this is one of the best times to do so. Come January, there are a lot of sellers that look to list their business because either they couldn't get it done before peak season, or they're coming out of peak season and they're like, that was a lot. That's the last peak season I want to run. I'm going to go ahead and sell my business. And if you have taken a break and you've relaxed the last few months of the year, you will lose those deals because we will spend the next few months intensely prepping and preparing our consulting clients to be ready to go on any deal that matches their criteria come January. And those consulting clients see all of our deals before they go to the public. So if you're sitting here in October and envisioning yourself as a FedEx contractor in 2025, reach out to my team, ask about the consulting program. It's designed to prepare you, accelerate your process, and really teach you how to avoid all the mistakes that we made when we started as contractors so that you can acquire one of these businesses at a fair price. And that is really the message right now, is if you are thinking about this space today as a seller or a buyer, this is crunch time if you're trying to close this year. So doing everything to prepare and speed up the process, this is, these next few weeks, every day, every hour is important. If you are thinking about next year, there's things you should be doing as a seller to prepare your business and to really think about, come end of December and early January, the things you need to do to prepare your business for a sale. And if you're a buyer, these next few months are crucial to study, to prepare, and really be ready to sprint and go on a new business at the beginning of the year. Now, that being said, like we talked about, there's always sellers trying to list right now. And so we do have a few new listings this week. So if you are trying to evaluate and review, we have a few new ones right now. So I'm going to go through our new listings. I'm going to talk about our events, and then we're going to get to Q&A. I see a few questions coming in already. If you have questions, go ahead and submit that in that Q&A. We will get to them. We'll answer as many as you guys have. So we have 6 new P&D listings this week. The first one is out of Florida. This is 18 P&D routes at 2.5 million, 17 employees, a manager, really low mileage operation out of Florida. Again, anytime there's a Florida listing, they move quickly. So if you have questions about this, I would ask them today. Next one is out of Ohio, 13 P&D routes at $800,000. This one has 15 employees and a manager, and is again another really low mileage operation with a full-time manager on staff and a contractor with a long tenure with FedEx. Next one's out of Louisiana, 20 P&D routes at 1.375 million. This is a 24 employee operation and 3 managers. So it's a really large operation and a really strong management team if you're looking to get in at that size in Louisiana. Next one's out of Texas. This is 7 P&D routes at $559,000. This is 7 employees and a manager. So it's a low mileage, profitable operation. It has 3 spares as well. So it's a smaller size, if that's kind of the bite that you're looking for, but still comes with the manager. And again, out of Texas. Another one out of Texas is 21 P&D routes at 1.449 million. This is 21 employees and 3 managers. Again, 3 full-time managers, spare trucks as well. So a couple of different sizes out of Texas. And then the last one is out of Colorado, 24 P&D routes at 1.65 million. This is 23 employees, 2 managers, and spare trucks as well. So this week we've got Colorado, 2 out of Texas, Louisiana, Ohio, and Florida, a bunch of different places. And we put it in the chat. If you have questions on any of those, you can go in and ask those. A couple of events to just remind you of. If you are in the Chicago area, we will be there October 22nd. It's on a Tuesday, and it's a free happy hour. So if you want to attend and meet our team, meet other contractors and investors in the area, it's a great time to come out and visit. Again, it is completely free to attend. We'll provide the food and the drinks. All you got to do is show up and meet everybody. And then the last thing, if you are still on the fence, if you're trying to make this last decision on if this is the right space for you, and if you want to jump in, we host new investor summits throughout the year. And our next one is actually on October 25th in our offices here in Nashville. So we do still have spots for that if you're interested in attending. So you can go ahead and register for that as well. All of that is in the chat for those who are looking for it. Okay, let me get to the Q&A. So David is asking about the ramifications of the port strike for line haul. What are the potential ramifications short-term and long-term for P&D? So first, for those of you who haven't heard, hopefully by this point you've heard, there is a port strike that is happening, and we're kind of still trying to decide, still trying to see how long it's going to last. It is a pretty aggressive ask from the unions on the East Coast. And we will see how that develops over these next few days, hopefully next few days, not weeks, and kind of see how long that lasts. We did the webinar last week that David's referring to. We talked about it from the line haul perspective with Alex. From the P&D perspective, it's much the same. Depends on where you are in the country and how much of your volume comes from the East Coast. If there is volume shortages that are not reaching you, then that's there's not going to be any line haul to bring it, and it's probably going to affect some at the terminal level. It's going to be localized, regionalized, depending on where you are as to how much of an effect it has. A lot of the shippers did, kind of pre-order inventory and kind of expecting this to happen and trying to have a bunch of inventory so that they could ship it over time as this strike was happening. But it's just going to be a function for how long does this strike last? Because if we hit shortages where there's nothing, then there will be an impact, especially if you are on that East Coast, you might feel it more than others. But we're all kind of just trying to decide how long this strike will last, how big of an impact it will have. The main thing is if the strike keeps going, basically anything that was routing to the East Coast, if it's a small enough boat, it can go through the Panama Canal and go to the West Coast. Otherwise, it's going to have to go all the way around South America. So it's just going to depend on the types of packages you may be getting from overseas. But a lot of our volume, we're seeing more in the express side that comes internationally, but a lot of our volume right now, at least, is domestic. So it's just going to depend on, if the actual businesses run into enough shortages to impact what they can ship. I would anticipate more of a delayed effect, and it's just going to depend on how long the strike is as to how big of an effect it'll be. I would hope that, we don't see as much disruption at the local P&D level, but it is going to depend on your region. Next one here is from Tim. So regarding workers' comp, trucking liability, and insurance on lease vehicles, is it best to use one insurance broker or separate brokers? So there are a couple things there. I know people who use different insurance agencies, the actual insurance providers for the different things that they get. I would strongly encourage only using one insurance broker. So what I'm talking about there is insurance brokers essentially act on your behalf, meet you, learn, kind of your story, and then go out to different insurance providers and try to find the best fits for you. If you use multiple insurance brokers, then, essentially they can only go to the market to a specific provider one time. You can't really have competing brokers at the same insurance provider trying to get a better quote. So the best thing that I can recommend in this is work with a broker that knows your story, is good at working the market, and has. I would also recommend any kind of broker that can help on the workers' comp claim resolution side and is really communicative and that you can work well with is going to be one of the most important things. One of the ones we always like to recommend is OVD, Oliver Van Dyke. I always pronounce it wrong, but OVD is easy to say. If you have questions on that, we're always happy to point you in that direction and recommend you there. All right. So this one here, Leah, I think is for both of us. So Evan's asking how depreciation works. So as he's trying to think about it, he gives an example here. So if he buys a vehicle for $40,000, can he declare that $40,000 as tax deductions because of the depreciation of the vehicle, and how is it applied to the P&L? Is it a loss because the value of the truck is used up, or is it an income? What do we see depreciation as on a P&L or tax return?
So it's a loss. So it's going to be on there as a loss. It is always considered an expense, not an income. As far as depreciation goes, so yes, it's the amount that your vehicle depreciates on a yearly basis. However, as an owner, you can choose a different amount of years to depreciate it over, which will change your annual depreciation for the vehicle, kind of depending on what your tax purposes are, how you want to do your tax returns and such. There's no kind of, there's like rules for it, but like not everyone has to depreciate a vehicle over 5 years or whatever it is. Like there are different options for that, depending on, again, what your goals are for your taxes. But it is always considered a loss.
Yeah.
No matter what.
I definitely advise talking to your accountant about this as you're thinking about it. Some people try to accelerate their depreciation. Maybe if it's a year, I've seen lots of people who've gotten into the FedEx business just to have the depreciation for their other businesses. So sometimes people try to accelerate, other times you might spread it out over time. The other thing that I would say, and this is just kind of a reminder for people, I talked about APA and stock purchase differences. We always recommend asset purchase agreements. One of the big reasons for that is you don't inherit any of the debt or any of the history of that business. And you also don't inherit the depreciation schedule. So whatever the value of the fleet is when you buy a business is the amount that you get to depreciate on those vehicles. And so you kind of get to start over. If you buy a business as a stock purchase, where essentially you're buying the business entity itself and everything associated with it, so you'd inherit that name and those vehicles, you would also be inheriting the depreciation schedule. So whatever depreciation has already happened on those vehicles, that remains on the balance sheet. So you don't get to reset that. So it's really important. And I see people get excited about stock agreements for one reason or another and miss depreciation. And that can be a big change when you're talking about taxes over time. So that's what I would say on depreciation and kind of address there. Now, I'm not seeing any other questions that have come in. I'm talking slowly to give any last second typers the chance to type in a question. Oh, there's one. Nice. Okay, so my cadence was successful. Casey was just thanking us, just appreciating us for the videos and the content, and hopefully that they will get in soon. I hope to see it too. And one of the things on these is that it's always Leah and I don't get to talk to anybody other than each other in this blank screen. So hopefully I get to meet everybody in person at things like our events, the expo that happens, or any of those new investor summits, so we can talk and ideally kind of help accelerate your journey here. I do see that Casey asked about seller financing versus vehicle financing. There's a lot to think about there. If you can get both, great. When I think about seller financing, we try to have our sellers include that in every deal, ideally. At least some percentage. 10% is kind of what we tell sellers to expect. Sometimes we see higher than that, but it really is going to depend on the situation. But as much, as a buyer, you're essentially, for seller financing, the seller is acting as a bank. In some ways that can be more flexible, but it's just a question of if the seller's open to it and how much they want to kind of be on the line. There are some who don't need cash immediately and are very comfortable with spreading this out over time and getting regular payments, and some that want as little as possible in seller financing because they want the capital up front. So it's just a conversation. Vehicle financing, you don't really get to control if it's there or not. If it is there, it's often great. You just really want to make sure you know what the terms are and the length and what the outstanding balance is to really decide if it's debt that you want to inherit. The follow-up question here, just how do we value businesses? I know it's a big answer, but like if you were trying to think kind of some highlights about how we look at valuing a business, how would you answer that, since you've done a few 100,000, whatever it is?
Oh yeah, only about 1 million. No. Yeah, that is definitely a big question and probably would take more than one webinar to cover. But a couple of the things that we look at, high level, the net income of the business is going to be one of the really, really big factors, as looking at how much money the business makes. If it makes a ton of money, it's going to be worth more. If it doesn't make as much money, it's going to be worth less. That's definitely one of them. The fleet is going to be another factor that we look at. So the condition of the fleet, if it's newer, if it's older, the value of the vehicles. We also look at things like geography of the business. Is it located in kind of a premium area? That's going to impact the business. If it's a really popular part of the country or popular city, popular state, whatever it may be. Another factor that really comes into play too is kind of the seller's goals and their timelines. If the seller's operating kind of like we spoke earlier on, like one of those really, really tightened, very short timelines, they want to get out really quickly. They might want to list their business at a lower price in order to sell quickly, but if they don't have any type of time constraints, and they may want to, get the highest dollar amount, that can play a factor as well. So I would say most importantly, NOI of the business is going to be the primary factor there, but there's a lot of other factors that we consider as well.
Yeah, but we know what these on average should value at, and then I would say there are pluses or minuses that holistically affect the value of the business, and it's the same things that we had talked through. But yeah, there are things that we know bring up the value of the business, and there are things that we know bring it down. So, and we're very transparent with how we're at evaluation for a business, both with the seller and a buyer, about why we think it's worth what it is, and it's always a conversation we're happy to have. Aaron, so he's asking on the line haul side, is it correct that every line haul in the country has the same rates? Sort of. What I would say is that in line haul, the rates are set regionally. So it's not set at the contractual level, where it's not like every single contractor has a different rate. Line haul essentially sets the rates for a region, and every end of September or end of August, beginning of September, FedEx just increases the rates across the country at the same time for all contractors, but they're set at a kind of a regional level. So you will have the same rates as someone else in your area, but it's not the exact same across the country. Really, they're trying to account for things like the cost of fuel in one state versus another, and maintenance in one state, and the taxes to operate in a state. So they do look at it at that level, but it's not at the individual contractor level. Daniel's asking, how do we as route consultant help with if somebody's trying to buy trucks? So we don't own trucks, so I don't have any trucks for sale, but what we do have is we have, if you're trying to buy a business that you need vehicles, whether it's line haul or P&D, there are a lot of vendors that we know and work with really well, whether it's leasing or buying outright, that we can put you in contact with early in the process. So if you're going after a deal, let's say, and you're working with us as part of our consulting program, and you know that you're going to need 6 vehicles, we're not going to just say, you need 6 vehicles, good luck. We're going to be working with you the whole time, because we know that you won't be successful if you don't have vehicles leading up to closing. So we're going to be working with you to say, here are some vendors that have some in stock. Here's some leasing options based on your area. I want you to evaluate each of those. We can talk through the differences. I would also say that as you're going through the process, we know a lot of contractors as well in the community that may be trying to sell just some vehicles, and we're always happy to connect those two. And so whatever is the right way to get you to a successful closing is what we're trying to do in that process. Now, softball pitch from Casey. If they're wanting to buy and find their route and they submit an inquiry, what is that process? And I can talk through this too. Look like after they submit, kind of they want to look at this route. I guess I can just answer it. I asked it out loud, but so when you come out in one of our listings and you click on one of our listings and say that you're interested, one of our sales team, our brokers, will reach out, who's in charge of that lead. They'll give you a call. They'll send you all the details. You'll sign an NDA actually first before we can send you anything. But once you've signed that quick NDA, we will send you the details on all the listing and give you kind of the context of anything, answer any questions you have about that listing. Let's say it was easy as that, and that listing is the one that you want to pursue. Generally, our process is once you've kind of answered your questions and thought through where you want to be on the deal, you submit an offer. We don't do LOIs. We generally find that it's not worth the time or energy or cost for you to fill out an LOI and have it with a seller. And we find most sellers are pretty hesitant to sign those as well in any kind of exclusivity period until an actual contract is signed. So usually what we'll do is you submit an offer, it comes to us, over email. The broker will take it to the seller verbally confirms it, and then we'll start working on incorporating that offer into a contract for both parties to review. And then once we are in agreement on the contract, let's say it was easy as that, you submitted the contract and the seller was like, yes, I have no questions, no qualms with anything you've put in here, we're good to go. Once that's signed, we require a 10% deposit to sit in escrow. Contract outlines a bunch of different ways that you can get that money back. It is very clear there. So we're not trying to hold that. It's just a way to kind of, confirm that everybody's moving forward in the process. And then you'll interview with FedEx. If you're one of our clients, we'll prepare you, kind of teach you everything you need to know for that interview. And then once you've passed the FedEx interview, it is really the main FedEx barrier. And from that point, it's about 6 to 8 weeks between passing the interview and closing on a business. And really in that time period, it's a lot of admin, compliance things you need to do, and getting all of your vendors set up. And if you have a bank, making sure they're finalized and clear to close so that you can get a stand-up date and be up and running after that. So that is a shortened timeline, 6 to 8 weeks after the interview. However long it takes you to negotiate a contract, hopefully it's short. And before that, just however long it takes you to find a business, and whatever that process looks like for you. So I think that's all the questions. I don't see any else that have come in. So other than that, thanks everybody for being on here today. Leah, thank you for being here, answering questions, providing your expertise. And we will see everybody next week on the next webinar.